Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and I have seen every single one of Amelia Fart's 354 videos on YouTube. I am just so super pumped about today's chat because it is with my all-time favorite animator who has given me so much inspiration in my own work over the years, and I just basically idolize him and think everything he touches is gold. It is none other than the stop-motion animator, Max Winston, who has created I Live in the Woods, Mr. Whoopman, and so many other cool projects. In our chat, we're going to talk about how he found success after producing his thesis film, how he's maintained his own studio space, RatBat Studios, over the years, and how he's gotten big clients like Cartoon Network. Now, besides being a totally rad animator, Max also plays music and is a drummer for the band called The Manx. But before we get into this episode, I have a sponsored message to share with you, and it comes from my friends over at HUE Animation Studio, which is a stop-motion starter kit that introduces beginner animators, age 7 to 13, or really any beginner, to claymation, lip syncing, rotoscoping, cutout animation, and more. Their kit contains the flexible and posable HUE HD camera with a built-in microphone. They are easy to use animation software with onion skinning, time-lapse, and chroma key tools. The HUE Book of Animation containing step-by-step instructions to create 20 exciting stop-motion videos, and digital resources such as free sound effects, storyboard templates, printable backgrounds, and activity sheets. So if you like to start creating your own stop-motion videos but don't know where to start, HUE Animation Studio is perfect for you. And to check out their stuff, just head on over to huehd.com. All the links to that are in the description of this chat. Now let's jump in. Hi, Max. Thank you so much for coming on the Animation Industry Podcast. How are you today?
Hello, Terry. Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty good.
Good. I'm really excited to chat because you're maybe my top favorite stop motion animator. I just love your work.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, I want to know just tell me the story of how you got into animation in general and how you ended up where you are sitting right now in a garage full of equipment that probably cost a lot of money over the years.
Yeah, it's all added up over time, that's for sure. Yeah, I guess like I've always made art in one form or another since as far back as I can remember. Luckily, my parents were very supportive of this because they are artists as well. So they always said, okay, well, you can go to art school someday. We'll just figure out how to do that, even though it's an expensive thing that it costs a lot of money and it's kind of a big deal to do. But they were always 100% there for supporting me to pursue the arts, I guess I'd say. So after graduating high school, I didn't quite know, like, I don't know, what are art schools? Where are they? I'm not sure. And so I just worked in a restaurant bussing tables for about a year. And at some point in that year, one of my friends was like, have you heard of this place, CalArts? They have an experimental animation program. I was like, wow, that sounds very interesting. Because I was into like experimental music and stuff at that time in high school, like John Zorn stuff and whatnot. So I looked into it and I was like, wow, yeah, this seems great. Like, I didn't want to go to school for painting because I wasn't just like a painter. I had all these different kind of interests. And so I applied and I got in and went to CalArts. I didn't know till I got there how infamous and world renowned this school was. I just didn't know about that stuff. I didn't know any animator people or like film people. In the town I grew up in, Sonoma, it's a small town. There's a lot of artists there, but not like those kind of artists, I guess I'd say, not many at least. So I went to CalArts and pretty quickly realized I was really into stop motion when I was there. And so I focused on that and then eventually graduated. And my first job in the industry after graduating was actually just moving motion control equipment from a warehouse to this guy's house for this company, Image G, just for a week. It was a short job. And at some point during that week, I got a call back because, rewinding a little bit, I finished I Live in the Woods. It was the film I made during my last year at CalArts. And I sent it out to all the stop motion companies, which were like 5 or 4 or something. And so I eventually got called back from some of them. And Screen Novelties called me during that week. I was moving the motion control equipment and said they loved the film and would love to try me out like a as like an intro kind of rate for a bit before they decided to just hire me on. And I was like, okay, yes, of course I will do that. So after that week, I started Screen Novelties and worked on uh, a bunch of stuff. At the time, they were doing a lot of stop motion for the shows Flapjack and Chowder. It's Cartoon Network shows. So that was the first stuff I worked on in stop motion. And after a couple of weeks, they said, okay, yeah, we would like to hire you on as like a full-time fabricator slash stop motion person. And that was kind of like start to in the animation industry. And then throughout that year, I ended up animating on Robot Chicken and working at a couple other places, and then just kind of met a bunch of people within the community of stop motion folks, and now that's what I've been doing for about 12 years now.
Nice. When you first started working at Screen Novelties, what kind of like you started as a entry level animator, what kind of shots do they get that type of person to do? Like, are you doing full like character walking and acting, or are
Well,
you doing like
so
close-ups of things that are not so complicated?
yeah, so it was they mostly hired me on at first as a fabricator, like puppet fabrication. But I'm also, I mean, what I ultimately am when it comes to stop motion is an all-around person, I guess. So I think they saw that in my film, and then me working there for a couple of weeks, they saw that. And they're a very small company, especially at the time. So I think to them they saw that as a benefit for them. You know, like, okay, this guy can bounce around to different tasks, but they didn't let me animate right away, and understandably, because that's the thing I was probably the least proficient in at that time. um Eventually they let me do a few shots here and there, and I don't know if you've seen the shows Chowder or Flapjack, The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. They'll have a lot of cutaway gag shots where it'll be like a cutaway gag to a joke that's, and they will do that shot in stop motion. Or sometimes there was like a minute long sequence or something. So there were a lot of just one-off cutaway gags where we build stuff and then animate it just for that shot. And they started letting me do some of those where it usually wasn't full on characters walking and jumping and stuff. It was, I mean, all kinds of stuff, a weird fruit going like, I don't want to go, or stuff like that. So they started letting me animate more and more as I was there longer. Till eventually, I mean, I ended up working with them a lot over the years, and I've done, I mean, tons of animation there at this point. But yeah, at first, they didn't just throw me on any old shot. They kind of like eased me into it with like, to kind of prove myself, like, which I did have to do at the time still, definitely, where I have to do it less these days. Not that I feel like I never need to prove myself, but yeah.
Just curious, what is like the difference of working at Screen Novelties, which you said is kind of smaller, versus like Robot Chicken, where it's a much bigger studio? And
Yeah,
why did you make that switch, or was it just because contract to contract thing type of thing?
it was like, I mean, yeah, well, I love Screen Novelties a lot because the people that own and run it and do the work there are all really cool. They're my very close friends. And I love the style they do. Like, we work very well together because we both are kind of pursuing this like cartoony stop motion style. But it was like, it felt like family there. It was just, sometimes it's just like there's six of us there in one space, just kind of doing everything day after day. You get really close to the people there and you spend all day with them. Working in Robot Chicken, at the time it was Shadow Machine was doing Robot Chicken. It was a different experience because, yeah, it's a bigger studio, but it still is, it's not huge. I mean, there maybe was 60 people there, 50 at the time or something. So you still get to know people in that situation very well as well. And I met a lot of great friends who are some of my great friends there too. Um, but like, when I went to Robot Chicken, it was like, it was just to animate, like, you're just animating, which is cool. But I love being at Screen Novelties because I could bounce around to many different tasks and do all kinds of a variety of things. So it's like, I guess I'd say Robot Chicken, it's not big enough of a company to where you just feel like a cog in the wheel. You feel like a little more than that. It's not like you're just painting fingernails all day for a year or whatever. um but I'd sent I Live in the Woods to Shadow Machine, and eventually got an email back from Ethan Marak, was the animation director at the time, and he said he'd love to have me over to do some animation there. I think for some weeks or something. I forget how long it was, maybe a month. And so Screen Novelties, I mentioned it to them, and they were like, "Yeah, you should go do that," because they knew I was new, and like they didn't want to, hoard me or whatever. They're like, "Yeah, that would be great." So they filled someone else in for the time I was gone or whatever. So it's kind of it can be very flexible like that. If Shadow Machine had said come animate for 2 years, I may have been like, I don't know if that's exactly what I want to do for 2 years. I like being at Screen Novelties, but yeah, Screen Novelties, the work kind of fluctuated. There would be a lot and then not so much and then a lot. And so I think it was probably one of those times where there was not so much and they were like, yeah, okay, go do that.
What was
Yeah.
the biggest difference? So you made I Live in the Woods, which is like cult classic at this point, and the animation in it is superb. What is the biggest difference between like animating? Well, I guess you animate on your own now, but animating something like that, like what did you learn in the studio world that you didn't know about when you made I Live in the Woods, even though you like uh, did so many varied things with that film?
Yeah, I mean, well, just how the whole studio structure is structured, like how there's all these different departments and they're all doing their thing, and then eventually it all converges down to the animation stage with the puppet, and then you're there to animate the puppet. And it's making a film on my own at school, I had no concept of that at all. I mean, I actually had done some internships throughout school, so I had a understanding of it to a degree, but I hadn't really been a part of it. Um, I interned at Leica on Coraline actually for part of a summer for a month, which was like mind blowing just to be, and when I was still at school, just to be around that level of production was like, oh my God, I can't believe everything I've seen. So I kind of had some like studio experience, but not really working and being like, oh, this is official now. It's my job and I'm here and I better do a good job. But yeah, just kind of like learning about the structure of it all and how, oh, there's times when you don't have anything to do because they can't put you on a stage. So you're just like sitting there, like, which is just part of it. But it's stuff like that I just wasn't aware of. I just figured you just work all the time. And you kind of do, but there's a lot of different stuff than just working all the time.
So you've been animating, you said, for 12 years, and about 4-ish years ago, you decided to forsake the studio life and
Yeah,
and go
basically.
and go out and be your own studio.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you? Because I guess you'd been animating for 8 years. Was there like a culminating thing that was, or accumulating thing that was like building up, and you said like, this is, I want to do this on my own, or like, tell me about it.
Yeah, it was a little bit of that. So like soonish, within a couple years of after graduating and doing stop motion work for these different companies here and there, I also started picking up some of my own freelance shorts because I had some of my own equipment, camera and some lights, and at the time I lived in a place with a really big garage with some friends, so we had like workspace and we're making things all the time and whatnot. So I started picking up some freelance work. Like I think the first one I did was for Jib Jab, which was a Christmas song short. Santa Claus is Coming to Town. I think it's like a minute or something, 50 seconds maybe. But so that was like a stop motion short and put your own kind of style into it. The guy had seen, Evan Spiridellis had seen my work and really liked it and just thought this guy could do a great Santa Claus thing, I guess. So that was like the first freelance job I did, which was really cool because I'm like, wow, I'm getting paid to make this thing more or less on my own, and kind of he's trusting me to do it in my own way. It was a really cool feeling. But then I'd go back and work in studios again, and like I say, that can be really fun. I love working Screen Novelties because I get to put my own style into that stuff because they are our styles kind of mesh well together, or I go animate somewhere. But like when you're animating on something, I keep using Robot Chicken as an example because it's such a common job for stop motion people to do in LA. It's been running for so long. If you animate Robot Chicken, that can be really fun too. And everyone has different desires and needs. I had a lot of fun animating on it because it's usually just very silly, crazy, whacked out, sometimes super violent, just stuff. It's just fun jokes. But ultimately, it's like I'm moving someone else's puppet that, I may, sometimes I walk on the set and just be like, I mean, I'm not trying to talk shit about anyone, but it's like, oh, I hate how this looks. Like, I would never make this look this way, but I can still have fun animating it, because you can still put character into things and whatever. But over time, I got more freelance jobs where I would get to put my creative spin on an idea or, design everything, basically expressed a lot of my own creative ideas in these freelance jobs. And over the time and over years, it was kind of back and forth, freelance jobs, studio jobs. And eventually I just realized, man, I do like doing it all, but what I really love is when I get to call the shots, like where I get to make all or most of the creative decisions, in which case that's what I get to do with freelance work in my own studio, which I'm in right now, as you can see. This isn't my bedroom, believe it or not. Um, yeah, so I eventually, after years of doing that, I realized, man, I just want to put more of my stuff out there, and I want more opportunities related to that as opposed to more opportunities animating on someone else's idea. And so I just decided to put my fist down on myself and just say, I'm gonna say no to studio jobs now and just pursue getting more freelance jobs so I can satisfy my creative urges all the time instead of half-ish the time.
That takes a lot of guts though, because like, you're well known, you're doing good work, studios know you. Did you have offers to come and work at a studio and you internally were like, I have to say no to this? And then you said no without knowing what your future was going to be like?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said I was going to do. I was like, okay, I'm even if I don't have a job at the moment and someone approaches me to come animate on a project for a substantial amount of time, I'm still going to say no, even though I don't have work, because who knows, in a couple of weeks, someone could reach out to me and ask me to do something I really want to do in my own way and stuff. So, because there were times when I got approached to do a freelance project, but I was busy animating for a few months on the show. And so that always felt kind of bags. I'm like, oh man, now I'm missing out on expressing my own ideas because I'm committed to this. And it has happened where people have reached out to me and asked me to come work, long term or longish term on their projects. And I've said no. Usually I say no because I'm already busy, but I have said no even if I'm not busy, just because, like I say, I'm trying to put feelers out there and bring more work into my own space and my own.
Were you working on your own project when you made this decision, or were you like finishing up something, or like, I'm just wondering because
Yeah.
like that's a scary decision to make.
Yeah, well, at the same time, it was like, okay, if this fails, it's not like I gave everyone the finger,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like if it was just not working and I wasn't getting any work on my own, I could probably reach out to a studio and be like, hey, I'm available to animate.
Right.
Are you gonna have work coming up? It's like I had the plan, but I wasn't gonna die on the hill.
Right. So you had a
um,
plan B, even though you didn't intend to ever execute it, I guess. And you also,
yeah,
it sounds like you had done enough freelance and were confident that you could pursue this as like it felt safe, I guess.
yeah, it was. It's not like I had just graduated school and said I'm only going to say yes to my own work.
Yeah.
It's like I built up. I've done work for a lot of different clients and a variety of people. So yeah, at this point, it's not like I'm always getting job offers or anything. But I did want to say, okay, I did say like I don't want to miss out on potential opportunities. So I'm just sticking to my own studio situation and in hopes to grow it as well,
What
beyond.
did how did conversations with your friends go at the time? People that were like working in studios, because like I don't know, I'm a stop motion person, and every stop motion person I talk to loves to fabricate and do all the things, right? And so like they have their own ideas. So I'm assuming a lot of people kind of want to do what you're doing, but stick to this studio contract life because maybe it feels more secure. So how did I'm just making a judgment, but how did your conversation with your friends go when you said, "Hey guys, won't be seeing you at Screen Novelties anymore. I'll
Yeah,
be in my garage from now on."
yeah. Well, it's it's interesting. Yeah, a lot of people I know, I guess maybe that's like a inflated way of saying it, but people will say oftentimes to me like, "Man, you're living the dream. You know, you're over there just doing your stuff." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, like to a point. It's I see it more as like a grass is always greener kind of thing, because there's great benefits to what I'm doing, and there's great downsides to what I'm doing, and yeah, it's but I think people going to studios every day, they're kind of on the grind, you know, like got to be there 9 a.m. to 7 a.m. p.m. whatever, just day after day, and it can wear you down. And I think people see what I'm doing as just working for myself, I guess, instead of working for someone else, which is nice about it, a nice thing about it. But a lot of people put it that way to me, I guess, where they're kind of envious of my situation. But honestly, after I work alone for a while, because I'm just here by myself day after day, it's kind of weird. Like, I mean, and yeah, and this whole quarantine thing, it's kind of like, all right, I guess I'm gonna do what I've been doing for a while. But like, I miss the people. I love the people I get to work with. You know, they're a lot of my friends, and they're awesome people that are really fun to be around. And I oftentimes miss being around them and just seeing people I like every day.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's a grass is always greener kind of thing. Because when I'll go to a studio and do work there, I would get the feeling like, man, I wish I was working from home again. So, but yeah,
Maybe there's a happy medium where you like work at a studio for a couple months and then do your own thing the rest of the year. So how do you, okay, so
yeah.
you know, you had built up a bunch of, I guess, clientele with your freelance projects at the time. How do you kind of predict like stability going forward? Like, do you have like I don't know, like a whole bunch of people that are, I guess I'm trying to ask, how do you get more freelance projects, and how do you make that
Yeah.
into a stable thing?
Well, it's a great question, mostly because it's something I haven't completely figured out yet.
4 years
Yeah.
in,
What's that?
4 years in, maybe you don't need to figure it out.
Yeah. No, it's like, yeah, I know. I know what you mean. It's like it's working out well enough so far, but it's tricky. Like in terms of stability, like the way I'm doing this, I mean, there's very little to no stability. It's kind of just like it's a wild roller coaster ride, really. Like I sometimes it can be a when it rains it pours kind of thing, where I sometimes have all these a handful of people coming at me at the same time trying to get me to do jobs, and I'm like, I'm doing this one. And then sometimes it's like I have no idea what I'm going to do after this thing's done in 3 months at all. I hope something comes up in those 3 months, because if it doesn't, I don't know what I'm going to do, you know, like. And then in terms of stability, it's like I don't have any like benefits or anything. I just recently got health insurance because I finally decided to pay for it myself after years of not having it. But it's just like I don't get anything like that, any kind of business or whatever work benefits and stuff. It's there. It's not a stable thing that I'm doing. I'm pretty much doing it so I in the pursuit of attempting to make a great piece of art. You know, like I'm making a lot of sacrifices to in that pursuit, really.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, I'm also doing this now because, and part of the reason I decided to do this a few years ago was like, well, I don't have any kids. I don't have like, I didn't buy a house where I have house payments. I don't have a lot of obligations financially, so I can take the chance and see how it goes. And yes, I'm still alive, and yes, I can buy food currently, but it's been pretty difficult at times. And sometimes it's not. It's just it really is a roller coaster. I'm trying to figure out how to make it more stable and make it like more of a future kind of a thing I can do in 10 years, be in a better position than I'm in now instead of the same or worse, you know. But I guess like but also at the same time, by doing this work, I get more of this work because the more of it I do, then it gets put out there, people see it, and then people usually come to me because they've seen something I did and they want something like that or whatever. So in my head, I'm just like, well, I just will try to do something great, and then someone will see it, think it's great, and they'll come to me for something like that, and that's kind of how it has worked so far. Usually when people come to me, and they have seen something I've done. So, which kind of means my plan's working, I guess, because that was the idea. It was like put more of the stuff out there so I can do more of it. So it's working. I'm trying to figure out how to make it more prosperous than it has been.
Fair enough. Well, your stuff is super unique and amazingly well done, so it definitely stands out. And like I've been following your work since you were in Cal Arts, basically
Oh,
when I
cool.
saw I Live in the Woods came out. I was like, "What? Who is this guy? Where did this come from?"
That's awesome. Yeah, I still get people approaching me to do jobs based on I Live in the Woods, actually, which is crazy because that film is about 12 years old now and it
That's
still
crazy.
resonates with people, I
So,
guess.
okay, I like your idea of I'm going to do good work and that'll lead to more good work. And I guess you've had that kind of philosophy even kind of subliminally since you did I Live in the Woods, because that still stands out and it's great work. What was if you think back to when you created that, what was your intention or goal with that movie? Were you saying to yourself, I want to create something like studio level and unique that stands out and will get me a job? Or were you like, I'm going to have fun just doing whatever I want while I'm in school? Like what was the underlying goal
Yeah.
you were trying to achieve by creating that thing that
Yeah, it was
is your
more
calling card for 12 years
yeah.
later?
Yeah, it was more of the latter, like of what you just said. I mean, so yeah, I had made a couple films in my the years previous to that in Cal Arts. Yeah, and so my second year, I was like, I want to make this epic film. It's going to be just like this epic thing, and it was very epic, but to the point where I didn't finish it my second year. I continued into my third year, and I finished it the third year. Um, it's called Ripe Rock, and that's out there as well. I'm still proud of it, but I'm still learning a lot at that time. And so I had one more year in school. I was like, all right, I just have to make something crazier, but less like, I don't know, less epic like the last one. So I already had made this comic that I based I Live in the Woods on, just a 3 or 4 page comic. So like, this would be a crazy film. Since I already have this kind of plotted out in a way, I'll use this because I already have the idea. I can just hit the ground running when my last year at CalArts starts. Um, but yeah, and so at that point I'd been in school for a few years, and I don't know how it is at all schools, but at CalArts you watch a lot of animation at your time at CalArts. Old stuff, new stuff, shorts, you see tons of students' films because there's a lot of students there. And I just had this feeling that like I just want to make something like by the by that time there's a ton of incredibly talented students there and they make a lot of great work. But I had started to feel like I've seen a lot of stuff that kind of people repeating things they've seen, and just I was like, I want to make something that's just unlike anything I've ever seen before. Because why else should I even make something? I just started having thoughts like that, and I love like horror films and crazy B movie gore and stuff. And I was like, I've never made a film that really reflects the stuff I truly love and like. I think because I've been nervous that other people won't like it or they'll be put off by it or something. And I just realized I just want to throw all that out the window and just make exactly what I want to see. And I don't care if anyone likes it or hates it or anything. I just want to make it. And I wanted to make a film. I wanted to shoot a film outdoors just so I could be outdoors instead of being in a dark room all the time. So I was going to shoot the whole thing outdoors at first, but I decided against that because it was a little too complicated. And I ultimately wanted to make a film that just made people want to explode, and just get up and run around and go crazy. And so I had these ideas like that, and that's why I made I Live in the Woods. I didn't know I didn't know if anyone was gonna like it, and I didn't care. And that was the first time I felt that way. Like you mentioned, like I wasn't trying to make a film that studios would like or that anyone would like. I just figured if I like it, there's probably going to be other people out there that like it as well. And it was really rewarding to find that that was true, because that film was very successful. It was in tons of festivals, got an honorable mention at Sundance, and was like nominated for a Student Academy Award and stuff. And it felt great, not just because, awards and all that stuff feel great, because I was like, wow, I made this thing that is pretty crazy and wild, and people relate to it, actually, which I had no idea if anyone would. I just made it because I wanted to see it. So, and I think it was actually also a reaction to seeing people make films because they wanted to fit in at a studio eventually or something like that. Like I did see a lot of that at CalArts, because there's the character animation department there, which is filled with incredibly talented students. I was in experimental animation, which character is more, stereotypically Disney Pixar stuff. Experimental is all over the place, but that's where the stop motion gear is. And I would just see a lot. You'd see someone's film, like, oh, well, they obviously want to work at Disney and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't want to make something like that. Like, I just wanted to make something that came from as much from my heart as I could.
Well, look at you. You wanted to create something from your heart, and now you're working day to day in that situation. I really love what you said about just creating something without wanting to make it for somebody else or consider someone else. I actually think that the more you think about, at least with art, what other people want, the less it actually becomes something that people stands out or people even like or feel resonation with. And the more you dig into yourself and kind of block out those thoughts, the better it becomes. So I guess over your career, have you been trying to get back to that? Because you said that was the first time you ever felt like that. Have you been trying to recreate that feeling with your stop motion work or that sentiment?
Yeah, I would say it's something I always try to keep in mind, and I am able to approach things that way, in varying capacities depending on the project. Basically, I would say like I made this Uncle Grandpa short called Total Reality. Uncle Grandpa was a show on Cartoon Network, and Pete Browngardt, the creator of it, was friends with me because, well, I storyboarded on Flapjack for a little bit, and we were storyboard partners. And he loved the stuff I do, and so he was like, "Hey, do you want to do a sequence or like a whole, basically, episode of Uncle Grandpa?" They were doing an episode that he was having different animators use the characters in their own style, and they'd put it all together into one episode. So there's like 3 or 4 shorts in the episode. I was like, yes, of course I want to do that. And he trusted me and just wanted me to go all out. And that really felt like, wow, I'm making my own film just with these pre-existing characters, but I also reinterpreted them and completely redesigned them and stuff. And there was no limitations. The only limitations were no sex and no gore. It was for Cartoon Network. So, it was really, I'm like, oh man, the only 2 things I love, I'm not allowed to, no, and of course, like that just, it was very, and a very freeing kind of like, approach and experience. So that really felt like, that was 5 years after I Lived in the Woods. And I was thinking when I was doing it, I was like, man, feels great. It's like I'm making my own film. And I do feel like that's maybe the best or one of my favorite things I've made since I Live in the Woods at that point. And then other jobs, it's like, make this candy cane dance around. It's like, okay, like I'll do that. It'll look cool and fun and cartoony, but I can't like really just pour myself into it.
Yeah.
I made a music video for my band. That's called Hateful Goo. That's the name of the song and the video. And that was another thing where, I mean, so that was about 5 years after the Uncle Grandpa short, I realized. And I did that because I was like, okay, I need to just do something exactly how I want to do it. Kind of like I was saying with I Live in the Woods, you know, like no one telling me what to do, nothing like that. Just all from stuff. And especially I had had all these ideas in my head for years leading up to that I hadn't been able to use in anything. I was like, I'm going to put all of these in this crazy band. Obviously, they didn't pay me to do it. It was just like me taking about 5 or 6 months of my time to do that. I only lost money making that music video, but I really felt like I need to, put my money where my mouth is, or put myself where my mouth is, and just make something that feels representative of what's inside me again, And so I did that, and I made the music video, and it was a lot of work and just a lot of experimentation and kind of figuring stuff out, figuring myself out throughout it. Um, I'm very proud of that. I feel like, I guess like what you're saying, yeah, that was another project where I got to approach that way, but only not because anyone gave me permission to. I mean, you could say my band gave me permission to, but really they've been begging me to make a music video
Right.
for years, and I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna do it because I didn't have any work coming up. I'm like, this may be just the time I can do this. And like, what came from that? I don't know. I mean, I've gotten praise from my peers who love it. I sent it to music video like festivals or just film festivals. It got into some. It got rejected from a lot. But I did it just to satisfy these creative urges I had, and I'm super proud of it. To me, it's probably like the best thing I've made. But I do think it maybe, I don't know, maybe went over people's heads. I'm not sure. I don't know. And I'm not saying because it's so good it went over people's heads. I'm sometimes I'm just like, did I go too far into myself for that one?
Or not far enough. Well, if it means
Yeah.
anything, I've watched it like 15 times in a row.
Oh, cool.
And I've also
Like,
studied
yeah.
your Uncle Grandpa, like frame by frame. When you make the tiger turn into different objects, and it's only
Yeah.
for like a second each time. Somehow you've done it so clearly. With I don't even know how you did some of it, to be honest. And I've looked at each frame multiple times.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that was so fun because they just, any idea I had, it was like, okay,
And the
cool.
sets where you have like all that glass it's insane. Anyways,
Yeah, I love, obviously, if you watch the Hateful Good video, I love just reflective things, reflecting things, and yeah, shiny glass, weird
so
shaped objects.
so let's talk about I have maybe I'll ask this question later, but first you said you were diving into yourself. What are you trying to tell through stop motion visually? Because you do a lot of experimental stuff, and you do a lot of stuff that I've never seen from any major animation studio or on TV or anything before, and you make it work. Like, what is the visual storytelling you're trying to accomplish? What's behind it that produces what we see?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it's different for each project, but I mean, it's, yeah, it's sort of it's a hard question, but I mean, ultimately, I think I'm trying to just create things that I don't normally see, really. And because for me personally, why that's the reason to create something. For me personally, I say, it's like, why would I want to do something that is kind of like something that I have already seen out there? And that doesn't mean I'm saying everything I do is 100% original, but I am striving to, and trying things out and not second guessing everything, just doing it, keeping it feeling raw, so the idea is out there rather than getting polished over to the point where it's no longer fresh to me. um and I think with animation and with character animation, when it comes to stop motion, I I prefer exaggeration. Like my favorite, I love so many different kinds of animation. But for me, this cartoons just is probably my favorite genre of animation, like Looney Tunes or Betty Boop, stuff like that. And I love cartoons because you can push and exaggerate expressions in ways that like can show you more about that emotion than any other medium really, and that's something that really excites me about it, where and that ties into storytelling because storytelling oftentimes has, you know, emotional arcs and stuff, and if you can push those emotional arcs visually with the character in new and exciting ways, it's like it can show people different ways that you can feel and think and stuff, and that's what I'm attempting to do. But it's, I don't know if I've gotten there, or I don't know if I'll get there, but I'll keep trying.
So say I come up to you and I'm like, hey Max, I have $100 million. Uh, any equipment you want, anytime you want. What are you gonna? What is your dream project that's unlimited resources? Even if 100
Yeah.
million is limiting you somehow.
Well, that sounds pretty cool. I would not turn that.
Well, I mean, like, what would you
Yeah.
do if you had unlimited resources on this train of thought?
Yeah. Well, I I do ultimately want to make a feature film someday. Like, you know, ideally direct the feature film rather than make the entire thing myself. Because, oh, I guess I haven't mentioned in this interview, but most of the freelance jobs I do most of the work, if not all of it, on my own. Sometimes I do hire people here and there for certain amounts of time to build the set, or sometimes build puppets or whatever. But my budgets don't always accommodate that, and it's also easier for me if I don't have to think about involving a bunch of people in my small space. As you can see, not that many people figure, but I yeah, I really want to make a feature film, and that's probably what I, if someone approached me with that, is what I would would say I wanted to do. Um, and you know, outside of my garage studio as well. In terms of the actual idea, I'm not sure yet, really. Like, I have some concepts I've been bouncing around over the years, um, that I think could be cool for features, but I haven't like written the scripts or anything yet. I've heard from some people that are well, that have been far more successful than me, that they have recommended to find a book I think is super cool that I would love to adapt into an animated film, because at that point, whoever is putting up the money, they're not, you know, taking 100% chance with the first time director, first time feature director with the totally original idea. They're taking something, this first time feature director with an idea that's been proven in some way, like, oh, your interpretation of that would be really cool, as opposed to like your interpretation of your own weird idea. I don't know. Like, so I think that may be something I've worked towards, but I do want to direct at least one feature film in my lifetime, if not more, you know. But in terms of the ideas, I'm still like, I kind of feel like it's weird. I feel like I should cross that bridge when I get there, but at the same time, I should maybe preemptively cross that bridge. So if the opportunity comes up, I could just have something there. But it's all in the process, I'd say.
How would you, I guess I'm just trying to think, how would you work towards, you're doing freelance gigs right now. How would you work towards directing a feature film? Would you, because there are like many indie directors with indie films. Is that what you're kind of talking about?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Like you assemble it. It's not, you know, not like assembling, getting a space and assembling the crew and everything for this one project. Like, I mean, you know, they did that with, you know, Nightmare Before Christmas, and then that led to other things. Like the same company made James and the Giant Peach years later and stuff. And of course, Henry Selick is stop motion master now. um, but yeah, an independent feature. not necessarily it would have to be like big blockbuster thing. Just like I love the format of a feature film. Just there's a lot of time to tell a story and really elaborate on parts of it, and go, into multiple journeys along the ultimate journey. Um, yeah, that's what I am hoping to do someday. In terms of working towards that, I don't really know. I'm not sure how to get there. It's weird. I obviously everyone else's perception of me is different than my own, but it seems that I have this, like, I'm like well regarded in what I do, and my stuff is known by people. Like I'll meet people, not these days obviously, but before COVID, I would just meet people out and around, I don't know, animation parties or whatever, and people I have no idea who they are. They're like, "Oh, you're Max Winston. I love your stuff." And I'm like, "Okay." Or the Cartoon Network executive is like, "Everyone here is obsessed with your work." I'm like,
Give
"Oh,
me a
okay."
contract for a movie.
Yeah, it's like I'm like, well, if you like it that much, no, but it was like, oh, okay. I don't have a perception of that because I'm just here, kind of like working. On my own, but I there's like positives and negatives of that, because I kind of think people see me as just, this weird guy that makes these crazy things on his own in his garage, where I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to change that perception, because I see myself as more than that, of course.
Yeah.
But I want to be more than that. I want to accomplish more than that, go further than that. But like, how do I change people's perception from that to like, this guy's ready to head a team of people or whatever?
Definitely.
It's a thing. I'm not sure. I don't know how to get there, but like I say, my mentality is like, just every job I get, just do the best job I possibly can on it to make it as great and as cool as I can, and then hopefully that'll lead to bigger things. That's just the mentality I have, and the one I know how to live with, I guess.
But okay, so I love that, but let me maybe challenge you on that, because on the other side, you're doing this by yourself, and I guess what you're learning to do is to do more amazing work by yourself instead of building up a team slowly over time. So one of my questions that I said maybe I'll ask later was something I thought of before, when you said I have to turn down work sometimes. Like, what's stopping you from, I don't know, saying yes to to maybe 2 or 3 other jobs while you're working on a job, and kind of hiring some animators and directing them? And maybe, that's like a temporary thing, and it lasts for those gigs, and then you have to scale down, and then wait for the next gigs. But over time, you might, you figure out how to bring in more business, and you work with more people, and you slowly work your way up, and then suddenly you're directing, and then you have bigger projects coming your way. It's, you know what I'm saying, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would love to do that.
First we have to solve the pandemic.
Well, yeah, that's definitely been thrown a few things off, but I also, I don't want to use that as an excuse for, anything. Although I say I have had people in here working with me. The short I made, that Plain Jane short I made kind of recently, that was puppets. My friend built the sets. I had people working on that. I was directing them and whatnot. I've done that before too. I guess what I'm saying is I have said yes to multiple jobs at once and tried to kind of make it work, and it has just about killed me.
Oh no.
Not because I can't like work hard, because I always work hard, but just I don't have the facility to facilitate such a situation. Like, I have this 2-car garage I do all my work in, and I can only fit so much in here, and I can only have so many people in here, and the job's only provided so much money. So I would love to just hire more people or get a bigger space to like fill for this stuff, but I guess it oftentimes comes down to the budgets I oftentimes get. While they're good, oftentimes I'm satisfied with them. they're not usually enough to like make that jump to rent a bigger space and fill it with more people, where that's something I'm trying to figure out how to figure out to do is get higher paying work basically. So I could be like, now's the time, this project will keep it going for even just 6 months and a bigger space, get a handful of people in there and do it and do this kind of like what you're describing.
Yeah.
It's also something it's hard to do on my own, like to do a project while I'm like leading it to the next destination. I want to get like a producer. I was working with Dylan Markey, my friend, who's also a great stop motion animator. He was producing those projects when I was doing Plain Jane and these trolley spots and a few other things. And he was working as the producer then, so he was kind of organizing everything, and that was cool. But at the same time, now I just have one job going, and so he can't just stick around for that, or doesn't really need to stick around for that. He also has his own stuff going on. So I would like to find a producer that could put the feelers out to get bigger jobs, bigger work, that then I could take that next step up. So I can focus on the creative things while someone else can focus on the business things, which I'm admittedly not as good at, although I've made it this far and some moderately successfully.
Yeah.
But that is what I want to go towards. I'm just kind of trying to figure out how to do that, how to get there.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like sometimes when I even talk about this, I feel like, am I just making a bunch of excuses as to why I'm in this situation and not in other ones? I hope I'm not. I just think, I guess I'm saying, I think I ultimately need more, just like more people working with me, even one or two, if I had it, so I have RatBat Studios as my studio. It's mostly just me. If RatBat Studios was like 3 people, that work in that pursuit could be more balanced between the powers of 2 or 3 people as opposed to 1. Meanwhile, I have to find someone that just has the faith in me because I can't afford to pay them to be here most of the time, So it's a weird thing. But yeah, I definitely don't think I'm gonna just like get plucked out of my garage and put on like directing a feature film. There's some bridge between those two things that I am gonna start trying to figure out how to pursue soon. Even like later this year after this current job I'm doing, I'm hoping.
I mean, obviously it's easier said than done. I'm making it seem very easy, and it's extremely difficult to do. Not many people or businesses even make it that far. Sounds kind of like you need a partner who is like maybe also a really good friend who knows you, who's good at that side of things, right?
I think I do, and I mean, as I say, my friend Dylan Markey, he was acting as that. I mean, he is one of my best friends and he's incredibly talented. And honestly, he's better at business stuff than me. He doesn't claim to know anything about it, but if you ask me, he does. And so that could be another, like, we may get back together in the future to try to pursue that, because he had really great ideas of how to potentially pursue that. And we still talk about them sometimes. It's just like trying to figure out how to just be kind of, both of us be here full time for it was getting a little tricky. But it's something that is like, on the sidelines, that is, I can definitely see coming back, bringing that situation back again.
We'll have to do another podcast episode after you figure it out, because I'm sure it's going to be an interesting journey. What if you said to yourself, just like when you did the freelance thing where you said, I'm not taking any jobs anymore that are contract, I'm going to do my own thing. What if you did something similar internally where you're like, I'm pursuing this actively now, starting tomorrow type of thing? You might, I don't know, you might figure it out. But
yeah, no, I feel like make the great proclamation to yourself is like probably one of the only ways to really get things done. And I guess, yeah, that is something, that is a good approach potentially. I'll have to think about that.
Life-changing podcast. Well, yeah. Maybe we should lighten maybe we should lighten up the topic a little bit. I'm just wondering, do you have any kind of tricks of the trade of of doing stop mo or bringing in the illusion or swapping
Oh
things
yeah.
out and making it work. Because when I've watched your work, and then I've like gone back later and studied it frame by frame, I'm always surprised at how sometimes there's very little movement or quick movement that like when I'm animating myself, I wouldn't even attempt because I'm like, oh, it's going to be too quick. And then when I watch your work, I can't think of an example off the top of my head. If you know what I mean, I
Yeah,
watch your
no, I
work
know
and
what
it
you're
makes sense. And
talking
then when
about.
I go frame by frame, I'm like, what? There's no in between here. There's just a switch and it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you
Yeah.
have any tricks that you can share that aren't so secret?
Well, yeah, I tend to be pretty open about my methods and techniques just because I feel like just telling something to someone doesn't mean they're gonna even do it. They still have to put in the work to figure out how to do it. If they're willing to, then they deserve to know how to do it.
Right.
But so like most of the work I do is basically on twos as opposed to ones or whatever other way you may want to animate. And I do have to say, you can get away with a lot more animating on twos. In terms of popping things around and being more bouncy, like, yeah, more cartoony, exaggerated. You can basically get away more with twos. And that's not exactly a secret, I guess, or like once you know that, you can do anything. But I'm currently doing a project and I'm ending up animating a good chunk of it on ones, or I'll go back and forth from twos to ones depending on what's going on. And or sometimes if there's a camera move, I oftentimes do the camera moves on ones because sometimes the camera move on twos is just too stroby. And if oftentimes if you do a camera move on ones, you kind of have to animate on ones. And that's more challenging to do my kind of cartoony popping style on ones because it's harder to just make something appear from here to there and make it believable. It's like, wait, like your eyes need something in between there to, and then at that point it may feel too smooth and not like poppy. So that's something. Try if you try animating on twos, if you're used to animating on ones, and you may find you can get away with more extremities, I guess I'd say. Um, but also, yeah, well, you just made me think of this one when you're saying like, oh, I'm kind of afraid to try that because I think it won't it won't feel right or something. That's something I try to do is just not be timid with my animation. It's just I take chances and experiment with movement and don't second guess things and that's how I've learned a lot from just, instead of being like, I don't think this is going to work, just trying it and seeing if it works. And you may be surprised that oftentimes may work more than you'd think. I still, like, when I'm animating, I'll do one move, I'll do another, and before I take the frame, I'm flipping and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Like, this does not feel like this is going to go right, but I'm just going to go with it. And then a few frames later, I'm like, it's exactly what I wanted, but like it needed those few more frames for me to realize it was right.
Yeah.
And that, if I was more timid at that point, I would be like, no, I'm just going to bring it back because it's just not going to work. And then it would have.
You just described me right there. Constantly deleting and going back and reposing and
Yeah, I mean, and that is part of learning it. I mean, I forget, you've been doing it for a couple of years now, I think.
yeah, just a couple of years.
Yeah, which, I mean, your stuff really looks great. I'm surprised you've only been animating for just a couple of years.
Well,
But
a bunch when I was in high school, and then
that's
10-year
cool.
gap, and then a couple of years. So
Yeah, but that's all part of learning too, is like, what you just described basically. Trying things out, but also being kind of afraid to try things out because you may mess it up. I just try to. It's weird. I've talked about this with one of my friends where we talk about animation a lot. Where it's like, well, part of the reason my stuff looks the way it does is because I'm very particular with how I want things to look in terms of design and everything. I see things a certain way, and I really think they should be that way. And then that goes in terms of how I approach movement as well. But at the same time, I'm not like super picky about movement. You know, it's a little hard to describe it. You know, if things are a little off and just here and there, or like, oh, I didn't do follow through with that hand when I should have, and it's kind of chickadee now, I don't really care. I mostly care about like, how does it overall feel? Like, how
Mm.
does the shot feel when you just watch it overall? Not like, let me, you know, nitpick every little thing about it. Just, does it feel good when you watch it? And when I've opened myself to that idea, a lot of, you know, there's a lot of room for, I guess, how would I put it? Like, I don't know, like happy accidents or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bob
yeah,
Ross.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's I was thinking about Rob Ross, and I was thinking about this subject too, because I was my girlfriend had never seen Bob Ross, and so I showed her some like on YouTube or whatever, and she's a painter, and well, first of all, I mean, he's an incredible painter. He's so good, and he's so relaxing to watch. But he's doing this thing. He's like, you know, just put some of the put some of the black up there, just, you know, there, like there, doesn't matter, just, you know, okay, put some black in here, maybe up there, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. And I'm like, that's so funny, he keeps on saying it doesn't matter, and I'm like, how does that matter? He's like, it's with intention, right? Like he has this great intention, but at the same time he's just super loose with it, and it feels great overall, you know. And that's how I try to think of my animation sometimes when I'm doing it. I'm like, if I get stuck on something, I'm just like, it doesn't matter, just go through it and then see where it goes.
I'm gonna try out this mentality. I have a gig coming up that I really want to do some kind of off the beat stuff from my usual stuff. So I'm gonna keep this in mind for when I'm
Cool.
animating. This is helpful
Sounds
for me.
exciting.
Yeah. I'm wondering, maybe as we're just kind of finishing up this chat, is there anything else that you wanted to share?
uh I'm not sure really.
How about this? What is the, I mean, you've had a 12-year career specifically in a very niche of a niche industry, stop motion. What is the mentality that you kind of rely on that has kept you going from the start, when you think back to, I want to get into an art school, and then now I want to become a feature film director? What is that? What is the underlying mentality that has guided you through all of this?
Yeah, I mean,
That's a
probably
tough
multiple.
question.
Yeah, I know it is. It's a tough question, and there's probably
We need to
many
take a
things.
psych course before we can answer this.
No, yeah, no, it's, I mean, it's a worthy question. It's a good question. It's just like, yeah, it's I mean, some things like, for me, and I guess it all depends on your personal goals and like what you want to pursue and why and stuff. Because I do know some people where they're like, I don't want to animate. I just want to make puppets and that's it. Like, I don't want to direct anything. You know, not everyone has the same desires and stuff. So, but for me, someone that has all these ideas, wants to get them out there in this specific way. Um, I like, I do really think like trying to figure out who who I am and how I see the world and how I can communicate that visually has been a thing that really has driven me throughout all this sort of stuff, you know. And it's also what has made me stand out amongst other stop motion things, I guess, is because I just have that in mind, like, as opposed to, oh, the first thing that comes to mind, oh, Leica did it this way, so I want to try to do it that way, you know. Leica's great, I'm not talking shit about Leica. I just, you know, that's what has, I think, brought me here and kept me going, is just kind of, yeah, that, like, this pursuit of sort of trying to figure out how I see the world, and then trying to figure out how to best communicate that to visually, and then so other people can pick up on it and hopefully be inspired by it, and then hopefully go do that for themselves, you know.
Well,
I
I'd
think
say it's
that's a good
working.
thing for a lot of artists to do, and it's very easy to be like, I mean, I don't say easy, but it's kind of easy to fall into like, things are done this way, so I'm going to do them this way. but I think when stuff gets real special and lasting is when someone has dug into themselves to figure those things out and then communicate them to whoever.
I really like that. And I like that that's kind of the driving force behind where you've ended up. And I think that's really great because it's obviously working. And you're putting out good stuff and inspiring people like me. So yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for pursuing that.
Mission accomplished. I'm done. That's it.
Career over.
I've
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess.
No, that's great though. Like it's great. I don't know. It's cool to hear that you have enjoyed my work and been inspired by it, because ultimately that's a nice thing to hear, I guess, is I'm not just doing it for myself, I'm doing it for others as well.
On that note, is there anything that maybe you thought of that you wanted to share now?
Well, let me tell you. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I love animation. It's something I could talk about probably forever. So we can keep going.
Start a podcast, then you will.
Yeah. I ultimately do. I do feel that animation can save the world in ways, because I feel that it can greatly inspire an individual, and that individual could go on to contribute to something that does save the world. So that's something else that just keeps me going to animation, because I'm like, this is good for the world. It's good for people, and it could ultimately save the planet.
I love that. I think that's a great note to end up on. Well, Max, thank you so much for coming on the chat. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear your journey and to pick your brain. And I'm really happy you said yes to coming on the chat. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Terry. Yeah, I'm really glad you asked me to be on here. If anything, it's just fun to talk to a new friend and get some social interaction these days, which I've had less than I even normally would have.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And if you're listening and you want to reach out to Max or follow his work or any stuff like that, you can look him up on Instagram under Mad Max Winston, or go to his website, which is ratbatstudio.com. And I'll include both those links in the description of this podcast. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.